Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be delving into how to write the best Common App personal statement. And if you haven't started your personal statement yet, totally fine. I would also strongly recommend you start it soon, especially if you're applying to a lot of schools. You're going to want to spend time later, closer to like the time of deadlines, working on those supplementals and just polishing. So really good idea to get that personal statement out of the way, or at least a solid first draft before you go back to school, or like in the back to school first couple months. So for a little background, I got admitted to Northwestern. I got off the waitlist at Georgetown. I also was admitted to a BSMD program. So hopefully I have at least some insight into what makes a good personal statement. And without further ado, let's move on to the video. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about is that like creative piece. A lot of people, I think from what I've seen, go into writing their personal statement wanting to write this like beautiful creative essay and like drawing upon some like really outlandish metaphor and trying to like relate it back to their own life or personality or interests or aspirations. And I think that that's a great idea. I think you just have to be really careful about the way that you do it. You have to make sure that if you are trying to write like a creative personal statement, that the focus is on you before the focus is on whatever metaphor you're using or whatever you're doing to make the essay creative. So I'm a huge fan of the sandwich method. I love to use this in any essay I write, not just like college application essays, but even essays I write for school, because I think it can be a really effective structure to like start with something at the beginning of your essay that maybe isn't totally related to the content, but somewhat related. And then you go in and you have like the body of the essay, the meat of the essay, and then you come back at the very end and like draw back on it. And then the reader is like, oh yeah, like it all makes sense now and it's really beautiful. So I really love that. And I think that that structure is especially useful for the Common App when you want to create an essay that is like creative and appealing and like interesting to read, but you also don't want the whole essay to just be about like something that has nothing to do with you and nothing to do with your life. So that's also what I did in my essay. The first paragraph of my essay was about this like trail that I used to hike and like the nature there, and there was like some kind of like metaphor that I sort of used to talk about like the things that I was interested in and passionate about. It wasn't totally related. It was a very loose metaphor, but I did come back to it at the very end. All the other paragraphs of my essay, except for that first paragraph, were about other stuff, like the meat of the essay. And then at the very end, the last two sentences, I used the same kind of imagery and brought back words relating to like the forests and the waterfalls and like the trails and that kind of thing. Also, just want to clarify, this is just one way to write an essay. There's so many ways to write an essay, and there are so many people who do write like creative essays that are like much more metaphorical and like draw on that metaphor a lot more, and I think that that can be really effective. I also think you can write an insanely good essay without using any metaphor at all, so please don't feel like you need to. I think that's where a lot of students get caught up, is that they feel like they need to write this like beautiful piece of poetry, and like that's not true at all. So do whatever feels most comfortable to you, but this is what I did. Another tip that I have is to use this essay to provide context and sort of expand on your resume. So, the 10 activities that you listed in the Common App and like all of the awards, you can use this essay to sort of provide context to those things and tell the story of how these things fell into place. For instance, like maybe if you love math, like you can go back and talk about childhood briefly. Like make sure to not spend the whole essay talking about your childhood, but like it's okay to be like when I was 8 years old, I had a great teacher who introduced me to math, and it felt like a way to make sense of the world, and ever since then I've just been fascinated. And when I was in high school, I joined math team, and that led me to this, and that led me to that. And so it's okay to like do that and to sort of like contextualize some of the things that you were involved in and talk about how you became passionate about them, and more importantly, like what you took from them and how these experiences shaped what you want to do with your future. So I'm also briefly going to discuss the like don't do's with the Common App, because I think that might be a little bit more helpful. So I think that if you are writing an essay where you're planning to talk about the extracurriculars you were involved in high school, or the classes that you took, or the sports that you were involved in, or whatever it is that you did, I think it's really important that you don't write an essay that becomes like a grocery list, or like just another copy of your resume, because they have that, right? Like they know what you did. this essay is an opportunity for you to talk about what you took from those things and what you learned from those things. I think that that's the most important thing, even more important than like providing context to how you became interested in these things, is like talking about how these opportunities shaped who you are now. So my next tip is to not get caught up in trying to write like a really dramatic essay. I think it's like a commonly accepted joke nowadays to talk about like how you like need to have some kind of traumatic experience happen to you to write a good college essay. But that's just not true at all, because most people don't have that. And if you do, like if there is something really big and, you know, life-changing that happened to you, then absolutely you should use this essay as an opportunity to talk about how that, you know, affected you and changed the trajectory of your life. But if you don't have that, like don't try searching for things. I personally think that admissions committees can see through that. And I've read quite a few essays myself for people, and I think I'm always equally, if not more, impressed by somebody who's able to write a strong essay without drawing on some kind of like sad story or like dramatic event than people who do include that kind of thing. So you're totally not at a disadvantage if you haven't had something like terrible happen to you in life. And you can write a really strong essay regardless. So this was actually a little bit of a hard video for me to make, because I think that there are so many ways to write a good personal statement. Like there are very few like very general tips I can give you, just because everybody's essay is going to be so different. And the way that I chose to write my essay, by expanding on the things that I did in high school, and creating a little metaphor to go along with it, and talking about how these experiences that I had shaped my interests and my passions. That's one way to write an essay. It's one way to write a personal statement. It's not the only way to write a personal statement. The most important thing, especially like with college admissions, is just really showcasing who you are in this essay, which sounds so cliche, but that's what it is, right? Like that's why there are so many prompts for the Common App, is that they're not looking for one specific kind of essay, one specific kind of essay structure. Like this is your opportunity to show who you are and to do it in whatever way feels most comfortable to you. And that leads me to my final tip, which is to make sure that when you're writing your Common App, you're writing about you. I think a lot of people love to write the personal statement about somebody that inspired them or had a huge impact on their life, like some relative or somebody else. And that's wonderful. I think that that's a great essay to write, and I think it can be really beautiful and people can be very impacted by that. But the most important thing, if you are choosing to write an essay like that, is that the majority of the essay is focusing on you. You can talk about how that person shaped who you are and you know, sort of like transformed you into the person you are today, but the majority of the essay should be you talking about yourself. Same thing with like, if you're using some kind of metaphor in your essay, you know, if you're comparing your life to a kitchen or your life to a game of basketball or whatever it may be, like you have to make sure to bring it home, like bring the point home. Don't become caught up in like that metaphor. Don't become caught up in trying to make your essay sound creative or poetic or whatever it may be. Make sure that you are showcasing who you are and using as many of the 650 words that you have to talk about yourself. That's all for today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, I'd appreciate it so much if you could subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I only have 250 subscribers right now, so every time I get a subscriber, I get very excited. So if you would do that for me, I'd be so happy. If not, no worries. And please stay tuned. I'm going to be posting a ton during this college application season. But anyways, thank you for watching. See you later. Bye.